was the CEO of HealthTrust Purchasing Group. I retired about 2 years ago, but Ben knows his stuff when it comes to sales. He's been at the very top of Medtronic's organization for quite some time. And I'm very happy to have him kind of co-present and filling in for Ed, who couldn't make it. Ed Jones, the current CEO of HealthTrust, could not make it. I talked to him yesterday. He was very sorry. He had a very large customer making a decision on their GPO affiliation and wanted to meet with him today, and so he had to fly to Philadelphia for that meeting and couldn't make it. So hopefully Ben and I will be able to do at least a decent job filling in for him. Larry said actually it was good that Ed couldn't make it. I'll tell you it's bad for several reasons. Number one, I had 15 minutes to prepare for this speech. Then probably less than that. And then number two, I had to follow Michael. And that is something that hopefully I'm thinking, I hope I don't embarrass myself too much in following him. He was terrific. You recall in Michael's speech or presentation, one of the earlier parts of the speech, the middle part, he was talking about the different complexity of your sales relationships, where you have the direct sale to the customer was complexity one, or the easiest, and then complexity number two is where you had potentially another party involved, a middleman involved, and he used the example of GPOs and how that can potentially increase the complexity of the sale, the cost of the sale. And Ben and I are going to really talk a little bit about GPOs, and Michael's absolutely right. It is an added complexity. GPOs are not right for every company. On the other hand, they can be extremely beneficial to your company if your company fits the right model and I guess even more importantly, fits in with the right GPO model. All GPOs are not created equal. They don't operate the same way. They don't have the same structure, objectives, processes, so on and so forth. And so it's very, very important that if you're considering a GPO relationship, that you get into the weeds and understand those dynamics. Because at the end of the day, if I'm the CEO of a company, the first, really the main question that I want to answer is, can this GPO increase my sales? Can they move market share? Can they influence sales for my organization? And I will tell you that in many cases they can, and in some cases they can't. We basically agree with that. The good news is with your affiliation with Flight Advisors, between Larry and Ben and myself and our other affiliates, like Michael Pearson, he knows GPOs very well. We know each of the GPOs. We know the executives in the top leadership position in those GPOs on a very long professional basis. We understand their models, and we can help you sort through those questions as you're considering a GPO affiliation. The second thing that a GPO can possibly do for you in the right model is they can help reduce your sales costs. And I'm going to talk about a couple of GPOs that are very similar in the model. Ascension, which not only represents the system of a Catholic healthcare system, Ascension, but is a fairly rapidly growing new GPO. Say they're about 3 years old now. And both Ascension and their GPO, as well as HealthTrust, have similar models in that they have what we call a compliant GPO model. Compliance means when you are fortunate enough to have a contractual position with those GPOs, again, depending on structure of the relationship, you can pretty much count on that pull-through or that sales growth is going to follow. And so they have very strong founding member support, some case Ascension, which is a very large not-for-profit Catholic system, is their founding member and kind of a foundation for that model. HealthTrust, it's most, if not all, of the investor-owned side of the healthcare industry. So you have ACA, Community Health, Lifespan, and several other large investment systems that are kind of a foundation of HealthTrust. And in both of those instances, those founding members or owners of that GPO are the ones that really drive the strategies of the GPO and are the ones that are committed to moving sales volume to the organization if you have a contract. So I have been involved with many of you as you've kind of gone down the path of looking at GPO affiliations. We're very excited that Premier Parking, Ryan, CEO back here, Chapman, as well as Vital Records Control, both of those have just recently received their HealthTrust contracts, and we're really excited about that. Now we're in the process of kind of planning, okay, what's the next step to drive sales volume with those organizations. We've also worked with Skyline Medical, ACCA, we're probably missing a few companies that provide our trust. We've made a lot of introductions, and we're trying to move the ball forward with a lot of other organizations. Been successful with you and not successful in others, so we're working through that. The other thing I would point out about Ascension and HealthTrust is they have very defined processes where they use end user committees that advise them in all of the areas that they put under contract, and they have found that compliant model works best when the end users are involved in the decision making resulting to the vendors that put in the contract and products and services, and so both of those models are very similar. I will wrap up by just saying again, I'm probably most familiar with those two organizations of any of the other GPOs. And again, if you have interest in working with those GPOs and want to explore whether it's would be good for your company and yourselves, be happy to do that. Ben has had an extensive amount of experience with all the GPOs in the industry, including HealthTrust. I used to beat them up a lot in negotiating contracts, but somehow we still like each other. But anyway, he's going to share with you what some thoughts and ideas relative to net assets, Premier, and VHA Innovation, which are some of the other large GPOs in the industry.
Absolutely, and I think to expand a little bit on the conversation earlier today, one of the values that we've received at Medtronic from a GPO perspective is really a third-party validator. And what I mean by that is if you're trying to differentiate, you truly have differentiating technology, and you're up against a 75% market share. You going in and trying to sell your services, your goods, your technology, whatever it is, that's coming from you, and it's can be perceived as slanted. To give you an example, right now we are working with the Methodist system in Memphis. And we're working with HPG because HPG has a newly established relationship with Methodist. Methodists use 90% St. Jude, ICDs, pacemakers, and CRTs. We can't get in there. We're locked out. We're not permitted to even go in there. We'll get shot if our reps go in there and try to sell anything. Through the new established relationship with HPG, that door has now been opened. And because of the advantages of our services, of our solutions, and our product technology, we're now at the table, and it really took HPG going in and saying, hey, you should look at Medtronic to go across your whole cardiovascular services, because we've worked with them. We've got the independent physician councils. As Jim mentioned, it's validated that Medtronic is the gold standard. They have some better technologies. They have some at least as good technologies, and because of that, they bring more value comprehensively than the individual deals that you have across all your different cardiovascular products. So having them come in and validate that has now opened the door, and we're looking at anywhere from $10 to $15 million in upside. Where again we couldn't get access to even go in the hospital. We were totally shut out. So again, there's several different ways that you can work with the GPOs, but I do think one of the things that's really kind of come to the front as Medtronic is trying to morph and turn into a service and solutions business is how do we get that validated? How do we get our foot in the door? Because again, us going in there, they're looking at us like, you know, you're a device company, you know, you want to try to sell us a blood conservation program or service. What is that all about? We're not sure we trust you because, you know, again, you've always just sold us very great technology at a very high price and got our physicians between, you know, the hospitals and us. So again, I wanted to kind of give you that example of that's one way to use the GPO. When you look at, I put Premier and Novation or VHA in kind of the same category. They're very large. They're probably the two largest GPOs that are out there. They're voluntary organizations, but inside of that, they've got very large IDNs inside of it. Some of them are members. Premier is, I don't know if they've gone public or they're going public. They've gone public, so they sold or gave a portion of their company to their key member, key IDNs. And so now there's a new renewed interest in really trying to drive compliance and drive more volume. So as Jim kind of laid out the landscape on that side, on this voluntary side, they're all competing for the same customer. So it's a highly competitive market. They're all trying to differentiate themselves. So again, if you've got new technology, it's not covered, or maybe you know, that category is not covered, or it is, but you've got something innovative. They are looking for something new and innovative to differentiate themselves from the HPGs, from an Ascension calling on. Because again, they're in a very highly competitive market. So again, being able to go in there with a new potential revenue stream is very attractive to them. And what you'll find with like Novation and Premier, they're flexible in their admin fee. You know, with HPG, it's pretty much a 3% admin fee. And again, they'll sell you on the value of why they can get 3%. With Novation Premier, you actually have a chance or an opportunity to go in and say, let's go with risk, you know, and let's put some targets out there. And if you achieve them, then we'll pay. But it's a pay for performance type of basis versus, hey, I'm automatically going to give 3% off the top. So again, there's a lot of things like that, the way that you can work with them. And again, incremental revenue streams is what they're looking for. They're big ships, you know, multi-billion-dollar. They're looking for growth, and it's hard for them to come by growth. So again, if you know, a startup company or a small company that's really got some innovation in there, there's ways to work with them, again, where you're not paying them a lot of fees up front.
I know for the longest time, I don't know if it's still true, I know Medtronic chose not to have GPO contracts with Premier and Novation. I don't know whether that's changed. And I was going to ask why. You know, what were the key reasons why Medtronic decided? I think it was Novation that
it was Novation and Premier, and it was on both. Well, across our businesses, we have two. We have a cardiovascular business, and we have another that's called Restorative Therapies, which are all the non-cardiovascular companies. Medtronic has 13 different businesses. The reason it was really a cost-cutting measure is why they originated that decision. And in the physician preference, you get even a more complex model than what was shared earlier, in that you got the physician who uses the product, you got the hospital that's paying for it, and then you got a GPO customer that's in there as well. So it really becomes very complex. In our spinal division, spine surgeons are still making probably 85 to 90% of the decisions out there. So they said, why are we paying admin fees to a GPO when they're not willing to go in and tell physicians what to do? The physicians still have the ability to get their way and get the products that they want. So that's not a good model. Cardiovascular went down the same path, but they found out hospitals are buying a lot of cardiovascular practices. I think something like 70+% of the cardiology practices today are owned by the hospitals. So now all of a sudden hospitals have more influence. So our cardiovascular side of the business said, wait, we need to go back, and we've actually recontracted with Novation and Premier on the cardiovascular side, where our spine side still has decided not to play in that arena. So it's really a value cost justification process that we went through. And again, we've kind of come full circle on one side, and the other side is still waiting to see when and if the hospitals are willing to tell a spine surgeon what product they're going to use.
We worked with one of our clients, Merit Labs, that some of you are probably familiar with. Very interesting business model that they have, and when we worked with them, they wanted to know, should we have GPO relationships, and Larry and I worked with them, we looked at the different pros and cons, and the end result was they decided not to have GPO relationships. The reason being is their target sales were really C-suite and laboratory directors in hospitals, and so we just didn't feel like the GPO would really be able to influence decisions relative to those decision makers that they're trying to reach in the hospital. So every situation is going to be a little bit different. You mentioned one other quick thing. You mentioned Premier and how they're really looking to expand their offering to technology companies. Interesting, the CIO of Premier is my former CIO at HealthTrust. And so, talk a little bit with Larry, but we're going to be planning hopefully a fall visit to Premier, and we want to take 5 or 6 companies with us to present to the CIO and see if we can create relationships within that GPO. So stay tuned, we'll be reaching out to you on that.
They also have a very big focus on ACOs. I think we're still trying to understand exactly what an ACO is. So if any of your businesses really fit into that ACO model, then Premier has a large group of resources and people that are really concentrated in looking at the ACO market. Also bundled payments. Everybody's kind of trying to figure out how to participate in that, and we're actually doing some stuff in Medtronic around bundled payments. So again, they've put a lot of their resources. That's how they're trying to differentiate themselves and say, hey, we're the ACO solution. They're part of the initial ACO Pioneer program with the government. We're still collecting a lot of data around that, and then around bundled payments as well. So again, each GPO is a little bit different. And then, Jim, I don't know how you feel about med assets, but always look at them as the wild, wild west. If you want somebody, if you've got something that's just disruptive, I think they're probably a good place to go, because the CEO there is kind of a disruptive type of person. And he takes great pride in trying to cause chaos in the marketplace. So I've actually been cussed out by John, but then actually have a good relationship with him as well. But he is a wild, wild west. He was one of the original guys that backed Randy Couture in the UFC fighting, back when you could only go to Birmingham, Alabama, because every other state it was illegal. So, again, John's kind of that wild, wild west guy. But they're willing to go out there on the edge and really look at new and different technologies, and you don't have to be a market share leader to get their attention.
And FCA, was it FCA or Clayton was one of the original investors?
There we were.
Yeah.
UFC. Hey, Ben.
Yes.
Could you speak to, with the feedback this morning, sort of the art and science of sales and closing the deal, getting to yes as quickly as possible, dealing with a reluctant customer. They're sort of happy with this relationship with this vendor that they just the status quo. It doesn't rock the boat, and you're trying to get them across that status quo to understand new, innovative value proposition, trust. Make the transition as easy as possible for them. How do you get to yes and close the deal in the midst of those headwinds facing?
A couple things. First, you've got to understand who the true decision maker is. I traveled with our CEO. He was new for a year, and it was easy to get CEOs to CEOs, joining hands and singing Kumbaya and saying, "Oh, that sounds great. Let's go do this." And then it never happens, because the CEO has a list of their priorities, right? And then to push it down to somebody else who has a full-time job, and now they've got to do their full-time job and try to take on this new project. We didn't get far with a lot of those quote-unquote projects, because it was really just kind of bought in at a friendly level, very high level, but it wasn't important enough for that CEO of that hospital or hospital system to say, I'm going to put dedicated resources. So you almost have to, it's great to get that endorsement, because then you can go to the people who are going to operationalize it and say, hey, CEO here said, something he's interested in, wants to get it done, want to bring a team in, or I'm going to come in myself, sit down with you and detail you on why this is a good thing. So I think first identifying who those key decision makers are, who really can make the decision and influence the decision. And then I think also you need to make it as objective as possible, because we've all been in meetings, and one thing I've learned, and I think Jim's learning now being on this side, trying to sell into a GPO or into a large system, it takes time. And you have meeting after meeting after meeting. How do you move the ball forward? We had a great meeting. Everybody was nodding their head yes, but we can't get them to sign the contract. You've all been there. I think to lay out objectives, when you go in there and say, number one, understand what either their pain point or what the opportunity is. To give you an example, I don't know if Merritt's here, but I'm thinking through my mind with Merritt, hospitals have invested a lot of money in physician practices, right? They've bought them up. Where's the ROI for them? What they found originally, if they didn't tie their income, some portion of it, into their performance, that all of a sudden physicians said, I'm not working 80 hours anymore. I'm getting a paycheck now. I'm going to go work 40 or 45. And they've had the wives nagging on them for, you don't ever go to little Jimmy's event, or you've missed this. And so all of a sudden they're saying, hey, I'm not working 80 hours anymore because there's no incentive for them. So hospitals have invested that money in those physicians. So, for my, just kind of thinking through some things with Merit Labs, why, I think a pitch to them is, hey, you've invested all this money in all these physician practices. You own them now. We can come in and help increase your ROI. So you understand that, hey, they've made that investment. They need an ROI for it. Maybe they're not getting what they want, or they need a better ROI. That's going in and solving a problem for them, right? So again, either addressing a pain point or finding a big opportunity. If a hospital is having financial problems, you want to go in there with cost-saving measures or revenue enhancement. If they're so again, finding that key critical piece and then developing your story around it. So it's not like, hey, we've got a lab service, you're doing all these toxicology tests, why don't we come in and do it? That's one approach, but if again you said, hey, you've invested all this money in these physicians, you've got millions of dollars tied up in it, your ROI is not where it needs to be, we've got an ROI solution for it. That's a total different conversation. So again, identifying that key person, then make it as objective as possible. Get them to agree to say, if we meet, if we can come in here and increase your revenues by $5 million, because this is a new procedure, or with Merit Labs, you're now taking this revenue versus sending it off to a third party. If we can do that, can we move forward? Again, getting that commitment. That's the key, and make those commitments as objective as possible, so that once you've checked that off, you say, hey, great, we've met the objective, and let's move forward. Because again, sometimes you need that little bit of a push. You don't need to be overly aggressive, because a lot of times that'll turn them off. But again, if you've laid out a plan that says, hey, if we meet these endpoints that we've told you that we would through the sales calls that we've made, will you make the decision to move forward and get that commitment from them up front? Then again, it becomes objective versus, it's spinning the wheels. And yeah, that was good, but I want Susie to look at this, or I want John to look at this. And, you just can't ever get them to close. So again, have that well-defined endpoint, if you will, that once we've hit all these, we both agreed to move forward.
But, one thing Ben said about taking time to get a GPO contract, I used to run HealthTrust and thought I knew the organization, and I didn't. Once you get on the outside and you go up against the bureaucracy, but I think of Ryan and Chris and the PRCs, from their standpoint, they just received a HealthTrust contract, and we introduced them to HealthTrust in January. So it takes time. I've got another company, PostStar Energy, has a contract with HealthTrust. It took them about 9 months. And I got a company, Skyline Medical, that's now over a year. Still trying to go through the process. So it does take time, and it's true with any of them. So the point being, if you're interested in GPO relationships, you need a plan that is going to take a minimum of 6 months to a year to get that relationship going.
And that's with having Jim, who used to run it. We're doing it on their own, probably could double that timeline if you can even make it happen.
By the way, the reason why Merit Labs has been referenced a couple of times this morning, and they're a new client. They're not a portfolio company, but they're based here in town and are working with plate founders. And one of our colleagues and affiliate is area, and so the command performance presentation, so that's why we're not here today.
And then again, if you've got the reference, I mean, it's much easier to make a decision if somebody you know, trust, and respect says, you got it, it's doing great, yeah, you ought to move forward. And so again, once you're building that referral basis, and again, that's an opportunity with a GPO to go into an HPG, to go into a Premier, to go into an Novation and say, hey, listen, as part of our deal, we want to do this. We want you to do a white paper. We want you to do a study on our technology or whatever it is, and we want to validate the outcomes that we know that we can produce. And then you've got Novation, Premier, HPG out there promoting it for you, saying, hey, here's a white paper on what we did with this company. So we tested it, we validated it, and now they push that out to their 2,000 member hospitals. That's a huge potential accelerator for you. Again, it's a third-party independent, somebody that they're paying money to be a member of, giving them that information and giving that validation of that, hey, your product will do what your service will do what you said it will, and here's the expected benefit or outcome that you can get from it.
And but Steve, if I can embarrass you for a second, I know a lot of you also are interested in having business relationships with HCA or community health or some of these other large systems here in town located throughout the country. And Stephen, how long, and Stephen's company On Focus now has a significant relationship with HCA. How long have you been working on that? I know it's a long time.
So 3 years prior to Clayton Associates involvement. So we had been, all over the place, right? We had done a pilot, we had talked to different people, some people had left, spent easily 3 years doing, and everybody we talked to liked it. But it was always, the timing wasn't right, or, something else had to happen. And we could never get to the right level, or we got to the right level and that person retired. And so I think, so we sort of came at it from a bunch of different directions through Parallon, HealthTrust, HCA, so leveraging, Jim and Larry and Paul and other folks, we were able to get to the right decision maker. And having had that track record in the consensus that we built internally, even though it took 3 years and it was painful, it actually helped us, because once we got to the right level, we were able to point to a bunch of people and say, oh yeah, and we piloted it over here, and these people have seen it and they like it, and things started to move pretty quickly. But even then, when we were being fast-tracked, it was probably 9 months, to finally get everything lined up and signed.
And it just takes forever to try to figure out who is the decision maker, who are the key people you got to get involved, to look at it. I know we've struggled with that, trying to figure that out. But it's so GPOs and these large companies, they're a bureaucracy organization on their own, and it takes some time to get through it.
I think also the segmentation that you saw earlier, understanding your customer, if they're uber conservative, you're going to have to show them a lot of data. You're going to have to, again, find a reference account. So understanding your customer is critical, because, again, they might not be clearly communicating to you why they won't move forward, but you can understand that just by segmenting it and understanding them. Hey, if they're an innovator, you want to show them the greatest, latest, slickest looking stuff. But if they're real ultra conservative and they're adverse to making decisions because they're afraid they're going to make the wrong decision, then somehow you've got to get them comfortable with that. Again, the best way typically is through a referral or somebody that they know. The other thing is, think about doing risk sharing agreements. It's something that we're now doing with Medtronic is we're trying to build a service and solutions company. Again, we sell devices. We're a device company. We go into a hospital and they go, well, what is this service? So we're having a hard time getting customers. It's really like a startup inside of Medtronic. But we're starting to be successful with a risk sharing to say, hey, listen, it won't cost you anything up front. But at the end of this 3, 6, 9 month trial period, if we deliver, then you can potentially get some of that back, or you can just say, hey, this is just the cost of us to establish a relationship with this customer. We'll go at risk, and we'll assume the first 6 months, and we won't charge them anything, but it will allow us to prove it out. So again, understand what that objective is. If it's a cost, then, think about risk share. If they're ultra conservative, they're the toughest customer to crack, because again, you've got to find out what will eventually get them. And a lot of times, other than referrals, is again, find people around them, even though they're not the decision maker, to get them to become disciples of your product. We then can help influence, because again, if they've got 6 or 7 people coming saying, we need to do this, then that'll push them to make the decision.
And another good, offer pilots. Almost all these companies generally have a philosophy that before they implement something across their system, they want to test it first. I know, Paul, when you agree with HCA, that's kind of a typical way that they've done things. But so it's a really good effective tool for you to say, look, I know you want this to be proven, so we'll give you a pilot, no cost pilot. Maybe it is that. Maybe it's just that cost, or maybe it's you've seen situations where it's free, and then if you hit prearranged objectives or goals, then it becomes a broader relationship. But you need to be thinking through how you can use piloting as an effective way to get into these large systems.
Jim, in that regard, I'm curious, how many of you have pilots underway right now with a client, or prospective client? Okay. And David, if you don't mind, I'll call on you with your experience and history of piloting with various vendors. What's been sort of your lessons learned and the successful pilots that turn into contracts? Getting the pilot to begin with and converting into contracts. What are the quick lessons?
I'd say the pilots we've done, 90% have turned into long-term contracts. The only hesitancy that we have with a pilot is they've got to have enough skin in the game to take the pilot in a serious fashion. Sometimes you can do them and it's too easy to back out of it if they don't have the risk factor going. But our 4 or 5 largest clients all started with a pilot. We started with one client that had 15 people working, and they now have 150.
How would you define a at-risk pilot? Are they paying for this interim period? They're paying for the privilege? Are they working for a discounted contract? How would you define it?
Sometimes it's an at-risk for certain objectives. Sometimes it's at a discount. If it's a big, we did a Humana pilot that we did it for free, just to show them what we could do and how we could do it. So it's if you're going to do a pilot, you might as well be prepared to strip down and give them all and everything.
Limit your exposure. You don't want a pilot that's so big free that it breaks your company. But most of the time, a company will accept a small ad cost of maybe free pilot to prove out your point, and it's an excellent way to get your foot in the door.
We've actually also gone to payers, which is totally new for Medtronic. We're in the diabetes business. We make insulin pumps for type 1 diabetics. We believe, the data shows, that a type 1 diabetic does a lot better on a pump. Well, insurance companies traditionally have not paid well on it. So now we've gone to the insurance companies and said, hey, we're going to go at risk. We want to do a pilot. We want to take 500 patients. Let's put them on a pump and compare them to 500 patients that aren't on the pump. And if we reduce our A1Cs down 20%, then you're going to pay us X for our device. If we're able to reduce it, 25%, you're going to pay us X plus. It's 30%. So that's another kind of at-risk model that we're doing. But where we had a barrier of the payer not providing, instead of just trying to sell more to the hospital and get them to convince, we went straight to the payer to say, this is good for you. Let us show you the long term, and we'll put our money where our mouth is. We'll give you the device free, but if we deliver, then you're going to pay us for the device. And so that's another.
Hey, Paul, could you share, I know your thinking thoughts relative to concerns that a typical hospital CEO might have relative to trying out small companies, new things? What are the kind of pitfalls to avoid? And one example I know that you gave me I hadn't never thought of was disruption to say the OR. It would be known as a killer because it's like a local hospital. What are some of the things?
Well, I think as a hospital CEO, they're concerned about their bottom line. They're concerned about the drivers of the bottom line, which are the physician relationships. They know their biggest revenue and thus earnings many times departments like your OR. And it may be a good idea to get in and in this particular example that Jim gave, there's a product that would cause some downtime in the OR. Well, you take out one OR case, the profitability during that short period of time is meaningful. And you said it's kind of that pain to change, discussion that Michael was talking about. So trying to come up with a solution to eliminate pain or to at least reduce pain is, I think, a key selling point to a hospital CEO. Anything that interrupts physician politics is a problem, because if that CEO, in fact, it's been reported in the magazines recently in Athens, Georgia, which everybody knows Athens, Georgia, because University of Georgia, right? Is one of the two hospitals there. The CEO and the CIO resigned or were booted out because of the introduction of their EHR. It was so painful to the physicians, and it's a standalone, I believe, still a standalone not-for-profit hospital, that they lost their jobs. So anything that threatens their job security, even though it might sound good, or anything that the pain point is so big, or the bureaucracy is so big, that it's just not worth the fight. Because if they're making, $1 million a month, and it dips down, even though they might make $2 million, unless they feel pretty strong about it, the next month, you're just not willing to take a dip. I'll give you an example, with Stephen on Focus. Stephen King sold On Focus to me for our group of hospitals, and while I thought it was a superior product to what we were using, which is an in-house HCA project management type of tool, it was so ingrained with the people that we had to fight to get that done for us within the company. The pain of trying to change over and the bureaucracy that we were faced with was just, to us, not worth the risk. We felt like it was good enough as to what we had. Basically, that internal product was no longer supported internally with HCA. They let it drop, and that's really been the opening, I think, for Stephen to come in. So, I wouldn't underestimate the pain factor, and think about it, particularly in nonprofits, where the CEO many times brings consultants to the board to tell the board what he wants to say or she wants to say himself. But if they do and the board doesn't like it, then if the CEO said it, then you get the blame. If the consultant said, yeah, those scoundrels, let's boot them out of here. We don't like what they say. So there's all sorts of political, job security, issues that you can just imagine. It turns on you in a second as a CEO. And so when you're thinking about that, it may be a great solution. But I think what I was listening to Michael particularly say about is that anything you can do to minimize what they're going to have to deal with on transition would be important. And if you're doing anything that threatens their physician relationships as a CEO, is an issue. And it's probably now a little bit dated, but I know many CEOs were hesitant to bring in a CMO, Chief Medical Officer, because that CMO might get in between their relationships with their doctors. So again, anything that might threaten that relationship.
And think about it, so many companies represented here, one of your value propositions is enhanced physician relationships. Well, that sounds good, but based on what he's saying, think about it as a double-edged sword. If you don't do it right, or if it's not implemented right, then it's a killer for that hospital CEO. So you have to think through those dynamics as you're building your sales equations.
And in that regard, just sort of thinking about the two sides of pain, right? There's pain avoidance. I don't want to shut down my OR. I don't want to incur the earnings drop. I want to avoid that pain. And so when you're selling, you're putting out that filter to say, all right, I need to anticipate the decision maker's desire to avoid pain. And then the other side of pain you're going in and acknowledging there's some issue that the leader is pained by. They're dealing with a pain that needs to be addressed. Our coding is horrible, our staffing is challenged, we have compliance issues, we just had this painful audit for Medicare and found that several of our staff weren't properly credentialed. I mean, there's a pain that we can help fix. And so it's sort of the double side of it. Other questions or points for discussion? All right. Before we wrap up, one quick little point of information. I'll turn it back over to Stuart. Not to be too HCA centric, but we wanted to share this with you real quickly. Thanks a lot, Ben. Thanks, Jim. Great job. Particularly with 15 minutes notice? Hey, we recently learned, and we've shared this with several of you, but we recently learned about 2 months ago, I guess, that HCA has put into place a filtering process for creative innovation. And Jim and Ben spoke to the HPG, GPO, decision-making, sort of get a contract, license to hunt, go forward. But there's this sort of separate process inside HCA that we've determined. It's a new process that they put in place on the part of corporate development to say, let's vet the different innovative companies that are coming forward for various pilots, for various opportunities. And let's determine at a corporate level the prioritization and the proper fit for these innovators. And in one case, it might be just a catch and release, as they describe it. Just tell us what it is, thanks a lot, go forth and hunt. Another is, hey, help, share it with us, let us prioritize the right pilot location. And they gave an example to us where there was a company that specialized in HCAHPS improvements, HCAHPS scores, patient satisfaction, and HCA found out that the company was being piloted in a hospital that already had good scores in HCAHPS. And they thought, what a waste of time. But it was because the CEO was friends with the innovator, said, sure, I'll pilot it here. Well, that wasn't moving the needle. And if HCA had learned about that, they could have said, well, hold it. Let's pilot this in these 2 locations that have the worst scores, and let's move the needle. And then the third area, the third sort of need, is to determine potential equity opportunity on the part of HCA to say, this company has some sizzle. Let's test it over here, and maybe, maybe we can invest with you. And so that prioritization. So what we have done is we've had 2 meetings now with to outline all the companies and to say, here they are, and you tell us, you guide us, so what bucket, catch and release, prioritization, proper piloting, etc. And we're having some revisited conversations on behalf of various companies that a couple of years ago they said, no, we're not interested. Now they're revisiting. Yeah, tell us more and remind us again. So just to let you know, we're trying to stay on top of all that inside the HCA family. And it's a whole new process that I guess 2 months ago they implemented. And it was news to us, and so we jumped in there to address that. And so far, it's pretty constructive.
How many are involved now?
How many companies?
Yeah.
We reviewed all the companies. They responded. There were several that were sort of catch and release. Okay, move forward. They had 3 or 4 where they said, well, On Focus was one where they said, remind us again all the piloting and the rollout. And so Stephen has presented all that and has been blessed to move forward. They're wanting to meet and understand more about Merit Labs. In fact, they did meet with Merit Labs in a high-level, detailed discussion. I say high-level, at a clinical level, and now they're running the tracks. Entrada is meeting with them next week, a whole revisiting opportunity for Entrada. And in ChartWise, they want to hear more about the improvements in ChartWise. Procured Health, they confirmed that the piloting was okay and full speed ahead. So again, it was just a very healthy dialogue to understand that we're not trying to end-run HCA or go around anybody's back. We're trying to follow their process and sort of vet the companies and form HCA give in many respects, as we call them, first bite at the apple. You know, we value that relationship. You tell us which of these companies do you want to prioritize? I think that's right. We've got about 4 or 5.
Their own investment, you know, the idea of them investing in a company and then going out and selling across the United States to everybody is really, I don't think, as much of their focus is that if, say, Clinical Inc. Came to them and they said, this is really good, we want to really roll it out to the whole company, but why should we basically let one company benefit from us making you a big company? Let's ride this up together. And many times they'll take a company and kind of create a separate JV company. So you still have your company, but then they JV the HCA portion of that business, and then you ride it up. So you get a bigger piece, you get a smaller piece of a bigger pie, much bigger pie. I mean, 163 hospitals. If anybody got that kind of contract, it would be unbelievable. So I understand their thinking on that, but they're not doing that on all of them. But that is, just so you'll know, that's part of what they're thinking.
Bo, aren't you on that track?
We are. We're coming to the end. We're a couple months away from the 12-month pilot.
But it will be, they will have some, under that proposal, some ownership, right?
We've intentionally kind of let that conversation not lead it because we want the business owners to purchase it on its merit. And we fully expect that conversation to come up at some point. Once the business owners say, hey, we want to keep going with this, I think that's when the other side of the house is going, oh, that we remember those conversations.
They'll remember it, guaranteed.
It was interesting in those meetings that they did admit that they were not organized or well organized, which we were glad to hear that. We did that too, but we wanted them to say that, not us. But I think those discussions have gone well. So we're getting close to our lunch break, but I wanted to do one thing real quick before we did. I've asked a company that we know and have done a little bit of work with in the past to come up and just give you all sort of a commercial. I've asked Jesse Mayo, who is the founder and CEO of Office Furniture and Related Services, to come and he brought a couple of his team members with him. But I met Jesse, I don't know, about a month ago, but he did some work next door across the wall here for our space and was generous enough in that work with us. And so, and I think he recently did some work with MRA, helping them recently do a move. And I know Tom back there, who is with Global, did, when we had our office space at MRA in Cool Springs, about 50,000 feet, they did all the furniture work there, did a great job. So we all have furniture needs. Everybody knows somebody that's looking for furniture. I'm going to let them tell you about all that they do. It's a very interesting model, and my hope is that you'll know who Jesse is at his company, and in the event that you personally, your companies are looking for have any furniture needs or know any other companies that are in need, we're asking you to call Jesse and his team. So with that.
Thank you for having us, Stuart. We appreciate it. I got a list from Stuart yesterday of all the companies that were going to be here. And it was kind of interesting that I had 7 or 8 of you guys I'm already doing business with. In fact, I kind of go back a long way. You can tell by my age that I've been doing it for a long time. I started the company as an installer. So I installed furniture 30 years ago. In fact, as I was looking back to the history, I realized that I had done work with HealthTrust when you guys moved out to West End, and I started providing used furniture then, so that goes back a pretty good ways.
87.
That's right, exactly. And Charlie was there, I think, and in those days I was pretty young and I didn't know anything about anybody. But I do remember you guys being there, Charlie being there. I can't remember who else was there, but there was about 3 or 4 of you that got that thing going, and it was kind of exciting. Lyle and I know each other from my wife and him have been friends for a long time. So I've been around the block. I'll tell you a little bit about my story. We were invited to talk about furniture, but I'm telling you, I'm not going to talk too much about furniture because you already know about furniture. But what I am going to try to do is give you a reason why to do business with us instead of anybody else in town. I started this company 34 years ago as the installer. I went from, my first client was Price Waterhouse, a bunch of you probably know them, and the other was Commerce Union. And that's how I got started. I actually got fired, so you guys will appreciate this. I went on my honeymoon, came back, and on the Monday they said, we don't need you anymore. So you talk about having to have a job, they go figure it out quickly. That was my incentive to my new bride say, oh, we don't have any money, any income. And I was so bored those days that I spent all the dollars that I had on that little drive honeymoon up the eastern seaboard, so you can imagine how motivated I was. So let me tell you a little history. I started OSI, which was an office furniture installation. I thought what I would do is go to the IDSs of the world and say, let me install your furniture for you, and I'll do it at a fixed price, because I knew they were losing money there. They didn't want me to do that because they were afraid that I was going to get to the client, that I would end up with knowing them and they would lose that relationship, so they said no. So I decided to go out and visit their clients and ask if they needed my services. I sold a few people and they said, yeah, we'll bring you in. And so I did that for a number of years. And then the next thing that I was finding is those clients were saying, somebody's delivering new furniture, you take this old stuff and get rid of it. So what did I do? You know, my father had a garage at the time. I didn't have a garage, couldn't afford a garage, so I put it in his garage. I took that and somebody came in and said, you want a file? I said, yeah, I got a file. I'll give you a file. Here, take this. They go, well, you have 2 files. Well, yeah, I do. And I'd paint them, and I do anything to try to sell furniture. For that particular piece, what happened was that, and you may have heard the term refurb. Have you guys heard that term before? What it is in the industry is to take an old piece of something, recover the chair, re-laminate it, and sell it back to somebody. And so that came about. It actually became a big industry. It turned into a multi-billion-dollar industry. So I started taking old stuff and redoing it because you guys needed more than one, and developed that program. From there, what I did is I saw the opportunity was that there was only so much used furniture out there, and I needed to do something else. So I went out and started buying used, new furniture. Okay, and what that did was allow me to supplement the used. As the industry changed and evolved, Steelcase, Herman Miller, and those guys started realizing that we were taking a lot of market share away from them. So they started their own remanufacturing business. And so what I realized from those guys were that they were smarter than I was. The used, the refurbished was what you got, what you know, it doesn't work right, I'm sorry, you know, let me kick it another way, and it'll work a little bit better, or it won't. So what I realized is you guys wanted new furniture, used furniture at a used price, but that you wanted to work just brand new every time. And so I started remanufacturing. And what I do, and I still do that in our plant in East Nashville, is I'll take a product. Herman Miller's our main product, which is an A-grade product. Most of you know about it. I'll bring it into my place, remanufacture it. Okay, that means I change all the parts that are broken on it. I put new parts in it. I use the same fabrics that they use on panels, the same laminates. So I buy them from the same place, and then I sell it back to you and give you the same warranty that they gave to you new. Now, I'll guarantee you, you won't find anybody in town that will do that, or even in the Southeast. That's something that we do, and we stand behind it. I made a mistake, and I'll admit to this right here in front of you. I made a mistake a couple of months ago, and I did a project that I thought I could do. And it turns out that Steelcase had altered the way they made their panels, and I didn't know it, and I couldn't remanufacture. So I ended up, it was about a $250,000 job. I ended up losing $50,000 on the deal. And the reason I did was because I said I was going to stand behind it, and I stood behind it. And that's why we believe it's a good reason to do business with us. As I moved forward after remanufacturing, I had about 80% of the market in Middle Tennessee. And so I needed to grow my particular business, and so I needed to find a good A-grade product that you guys would buy, that you were comfortable with. Thus, I partnered with Global. Global is a Canadian company, a multi-billion-dollar company out there, and they have the breadth of line that anybody else has to offer you. Steelcase, Herman Miller, I don't care who it is, they've got the same products. And I'll leave that to him to tell you about. I was going to tell you about all the wonderful things that we have in our warehouse. We've got a 250,000 cubic foot warehouse. I probably have 600 or 700 workstations in stock. I got 300 or 400 chairs. I have 200 or 300 chairs that are brand new in stock. So you can call me and you can have that delivered to you the next day. One of the things that we did with MRA was they ran short. They bought some product that was left from a previous tenant that was in the building, and they ran short of product. I was able to go to my warehouse and get them operational immediately because nobody else in town could they get the parts that they needed to do their particular project. So that gave us a great opportunity to help them and show the level of what we do. I want to tell you a couple of stories rather than talking about that, about how I think we can help you. And I don't know a lot about the Clayton Associates. I know that you guys are venture capital and have provided a lot of resources for folks out there that you believe in. What I know is from my experience, I'm a member at Rotary, and I was sitting at one of the tables one day, and a guy introduced me to somebody else and says, "Yeah, I'm going to introduce you to Jesse Mayo." And the guy goes, "Well, everybody knows Jesse Mayo. They started a company." Okay, because I've been doing startups for so long that people just flock over to our place to do that, to find a chair, to find a desk, or something just to get started. And so what I wanted, that's where I thought some of you guys are going to be in that mode, and we can help you that. The next piece to me in your business, in your life cycle, is you go from a startup to a company that's trying to identify how do I get where I'm going. I don't want to continue to spend a lot of money, but I need consistency. I need it to look pretty good. I don't want to spend the high-end amount of money, but I want it to look okay. Well, that's where I think we come into play, because we do the remanufacturing there. You don't have to spend the money that you do with the big guys, but we'll give you the same product and we'll give you the same warranty. So I think that's important. The third area of the life cycle, I think, of companies like y'all's is you get to that point where you're good, you've kind of made it, you paid back the investors what you owe them, and now you've got a little extra cash. Well, then that's where our new products and global comes in. We can help you with that image. If you're trying to brand that image, you're trying to develop what that's going to look like throughout your whole system, that's what we can do. We've done hospitals. Fortunately, I looked at this. I realized how hospital-oriented you are, obviously, because of all the backers. But, so we've done several hospitals. We did the psych hospital down in Murfreesboro. I think it was the year before last. I don't know if any of you guys were involved in that. When I was in my previous life with McQuitty, who let me go, we did about 20 hospitals of yours over the years. You remember Ray Nathurst over there. And so I was involved in that, doing that in those days. I'll tell you about a couple of our clients just so that you have an idea of who they may be. In town, we've done work with AIM Healthcare. Did any of you guys work with AIM? I started with them kind of the day they opened with Ingram over there, and he built that thing up, and we stayed with him the whole time. So we really enjoyed that ride. We've done some work with Parallon down the street, which HCA Centennial, we just did a project for them. We've done a lot of work for Bridgestone, First Tennessee. Some of our bigger customers, my biggest customer is in Denver, Colorado. Okay, and why would anybody in Denver come to Nashville, Tennessee to buy furniture? And I think it's because of what we do. We are not just selling furniture. We believe we come in and get involved in your business and say, what can we do to help? Can we look at space? Can we help you design? Can we look at how you're doing flow? I've done 50 or 75 doctor's offices and helping them understand patient flow. And so I was involved in that. One of our customers right up the street here is, what's his name? Alpha Insurance. Do any of y'all know Alpha? Alpha's got a nice location up here. We've done work for them for at least 10 or 12 years. And they called me and said, Jesse, we're going to take on a building up the street. We want you to look at it and make sure that we can get our staff in there. The real estate guy said we can't. So I go over there and look at the building, and the building will house the head count, but it's a nightmare. They didn't think about parking. There's a lot of people over there. I mean, you know, so they couldn't put the parking in there. Parking was going to cost them $2 million to cut that hillside allowed to put more parking in. They didn't figure that out. I figured that out. Okay, and I also figured out that HVAC was going to be a problem. And so the reason they do business with me was not because I was going to give them a desk or a chair. It was because I looked at it just like I look at my own business. Is that a good decision? How can we make this work? And they didn't buy the building. I'm confident that the real estate guy hates my guts. But I promise you that my client there continues to do business with me, and that's the way we approach business. It's in a partnership, not just to sell you furniture. As I tell Rico and the rest of my staff, don't go in there with the idea of selling a piece of furniture. Go in there and fix the need. Every one of these people have a problem, and they're asking you to fix it, and they just think that that desk or chair is going to fix it, and that's not necessarily true. Okay, let me tell you the last few that I've got, just, and I'll let these guys go. Bankers Life, they're out of Chicago, and we'll do 40 sites for them this year. So that gives you an idea of the size of places we do. Direct Auto, we're doing their headquarters here in town, and we're doing, they've got 3 other franchises that they have underneath them, and we're doing all those all over the United States also. Correct Care, I don't know if you guys know them, they are really doing they're doing, Jerry, I can't remember his last name, started that thing, and he used Ingram money, from the AIM guys, and they are growing phenomenally. They just bought a big company in Oklahoma, and we're going to shut down that site, and their headquarters is on Murfreesboro Road, and we're building that out for them. We're also helping them with the construction. One of the things I do, I bring a little construction background to it, so when I look at something for the clients, I look at it from construction also because I own a construction company. And so I got a partner in that, and he helps me. The reason I did that was vertical integration. I never knew that word, and I thought, what does that mean? I got to do some of that. And what I did is I realized I was losing furniture sales to the contractor and the builder. They were taking, at the end of the day, $30,000 or $40,000 would go over budget, and it would come out of the furniture business. So I go, I can fix that. I would always bid on the projects because I knew I had an incentive both to save them money and also to put a little bit of money in that construction side. So that's another piece of what I do as we look at it. I know I'm speaking fast, and Stuart said you got about 10 or 15 minutes to get it over with. So I'm going to invite these guys.
No, thank you. I think I got just a few minutes, so I can tell you who I am and how I work with Jesse. I work for the manufacturer with Global is the name of our company, and all of y'all are entrepreneurs in here. So the story behind Global is, I think, really interesting that y'all enjoy to hear. It was founded in 1966 by a gentleman named Saul Feldberg. Excuse me. He was a Holocaust survivor, immigrated to Canada when he was 17 with nothing. He got a job as the janitor at a company called Nightingale, which made restaurant furniture and eventually started making office furniture. He worked his way up. They saw this kid's got a great work ethic. They said, we got to teach him a trade. So he became an upholsterer. He worked his way up, and it's always his dream to have ownership of his own company. And he was promised ownership. And the venture capital firm came in and was going to buy this company. He saw the writing on the wall. He wasn't going to get what he was promised. So he broke off on his own, him and a buddy and his wife. The chair that Nightingale was selling back then, this was late 50s, early 60s, was $290. You could get a new Pontiac for $2,900 back then. So furniture was a luxury. So he set out to make a chair. His tagline was the chair the average person could afford. And he could sell it, he'll tell you today, $69.95 plus tax. And that he kept reinvesting in the company. And now last year we're the 5th largest manufacturer in the industry now. Largest manufacturer of seating. We do more than Steelcase, any of those. We do about 200,000 units a week. We've got 5 million square feet of space in Toronto, like Jesse said, 50 manufacturing facilities. And he gets the credit for starting the mid-market manufacturing, where Steelcase, Herman Miller, All Steel, kind of the grade A manufacturers you're probably familiar with, they're here up, we're here down, price point wise. And you probably ask, well, and it looks the same aesthetically. We saw that chair the average person could afford. He made a lot of money selling we got known as the cheap chair guys, where Jesse started as the used guy across the river. Kind of, it's a great parallels between the two of our companies, because we were known as the cheap chair guys. But he saw that he needed to change his go-to-market strategy with import chairs coming in, big box stores, all that. And so going to about to give me the foot and talking fast. He had to change his go-to-market strategy, and that's when we hired a gentleman that's designed for Steelcase, Herman Miller, all of those that you've heard of, to design chairs for us. There's two ways we keep the cost down. There's one, we're the largest recycler in Canada. So on a global chair, about 75 to 80% of it's made from recycled content, whereas Steelcase is buying virgin materials. We're actually doing something good for the environment and saving costs. And we're also vertically integrated in that Saul is very big on his word. If he promised Stuart he was going to have his chairs here tomorrow, and the guy that made the arm caps on that chair let him down, he went to that guy and said, I want to buy your company. And he bought it and stuck our logo up on it. And that's how we've gotten to 50 manufacturing facilities today. But furniture is a necessity for y'all. I mean, you've got to have it. You want it to look good. You want it to be a seamless process. The project I did with Stuart, I think, was pretty seamless. In 400 workstations, we had one torn panel and one scratch work surface that we had to replace. No jobs too small or too big. My dad, actually, Clayton, you live next door to my uncle Carlisle. My dad's from South Georgia and has a lot of funny country sayings. Some of them are inappropriate, but the one in classic business that I use a lot is the elephant didn't get fat ignoring peanuts. So we'll take one chair or 400 workstations. So I appreciate y'all's time. Hopefully I kept it.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
That's as fast as a South Georgia boy can talk.
Tom and Rico and Jesse, thanks for your time being here today. We're really short on time. We've got lunch outside, and what I'm going to ask is, I guess through Jesse or Rico, if y'all will get me or through Stuart